Being born into a poor family really sucks. You go to school, get good grades, and then go to a job that barely pays you enough to meet your basic expenses. I would often dream of things I would buy, such as cars, houses, clothes, shoes. If only I had a way out of this paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle, I would take it in a heartbeat. Before I continue sharing my story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification button and you will become rich within the next 5 years. Dave and I met at the mall. I was purchasing some new work clothes when my card was declined. I was so embarrassed. He was next in line and offered to purchase my items. He asked if he could take me to lunch after, and I said yes. After going on a few dates, we decided to date exclusively. Unlike my previous boyfriends who ran to the bathroom before the check came or snuck us into the cinema, Dave showered me with gifts and actually paid the bill when we ate at restaurants. After a date with Dave, I would often go to work and boast about our date the day before. Last night, Dave and I went to 𝗕𝗔𝗦𝗬𝗘𝗦. You know, you have to get reservations months in advance to even step into that place. After we had a lobster dinner, we took a ride in the limo around the city. I kept pictures of me and Dave stuck on my cubicle walls so everyone would know that I not only had a man, but a rich one at that. My plan was to keep this rich man in my life by any means possible, which also meant being protective of him and removing any female that I thought was a threat to our relationship. I must admit, yes, I am a bit of the jealous type, but who isn't? One night while getting ready for our date, Dave called. "Hey babe, I have a last-minute meeting with a new client, Mrs. Jacobs at 𝗕𝗔𝗦𝗬𝗘𝗦, so I will have to postpone our date, okay?" "Sure, love, you go on and make that money," I said through a forced smile. Dave and I hung up and I screamed, "How dare he take some heifer to our spot?" I changed from my red dress and pulled on black sweatpants and sweatshirt. I grabbed my car keys and headed to 𝗕𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗘𝗦. I parked a little away and walked towards 𝗕𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗘𝗦. They had a beautiful open window so that I was able to see inside. There was my boyfriend laughing and drinking with her. After 3 hours, I saw Dave and the woman come out of the restaurant. I watched as he walked her to her car and gave her a kiss on the cheek before she got in. After she got into her car from the meeting, I followed her. On returning home, I wondered if I was making a mountain of a molehill. I hardly slept that night. The next day, Dave and I had lunch together. "So, how was your meeting yesterday?" I asked casually. "It was great. Mrs. Jacobs is excited to start working with us. I made the adjustments she wanted to the contract, but now I can't get a hold of her." "I'm sure she will turn up soon," I assured him. During lunch, Dave got a phone call. It was Mrs. Jacobs' assistant. Dave had a look of horror on his face when he came off the call. "What's wrong, Dave?" I asked. "It's Mrs. Jacobs. They found her car off a precipice off Old St. George's Road. They said she lost control of the vehicle and she died on impact." "Oh no," I mumbled. We ate the rest of our lunch silently. When we were finished, Dave paid the bill and we left. Dave walked me to my car. His facial expression changed to one of concern when he noticed I had a scratch on the front bumper of my car. "Babe, what happened to your car?" he said. I looked at him confused. "What are you talking about?" He leaned over and outlined the scratch and said, "This. What happened to your car?" I moved closer to Dave to see what he was talking about. "What the hell?" I said. "That wasn't there before. Someone scratched my car and had the audacity to just leave." I threw my hands up in the air. "Don't worry, babe. I'll pay to get it fixed," Dave said. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course I'm sure. I would do anything for my baby," he said as he pulled me into a quick kiss. "You really are the best. Okay, I have to run. I don't want to return to the office late." I jumped into my car and headed back to work. The next few days were tough on Dave after the disappearance of Mrs. Jacob. Dave started talking about his cabin on the lake. I was so excited when he invited me there to spend the weekend. He said he needed some time to clear his head. I was so excited to be away for the weekend, just me and him. When the doorbell rang, I ran to open it. However, I wasn't prepared for who I saw standing in front of me. Dave?" I said as I looked at him, then at the gorgeous brunette that was standing next to him with a smile on her face. "Hi, babe, this is Jade, my cousin," Dave said as he placed his hand casually around Jade's shoulders. Jade extended her hand towards me and I shook it. "Dave has told me so much about you. He really is a great guy," Jade said, looking up at Dave affectionately. "So, babe, are you going to let us in?" Dave asked. "Sure," I said as I moved to the side to let him in. I was boiling inside. How dare he bring another woman on our first weekend getaway? Who does that? "Hey, babe, I still have a few things to pack. Do you want to help?" I asked, taking his hand. "Sure, babe," he said, then turned to Jade. "I'll be back." Jade nodded. As soon as I closed my bedroom door behind us, I turned to Dave and said in a hushed tone, "What is she doing here? I thought that this weekend was a weekend getaway for 2. We don't need a third wheel, Dave, I snapped.
Babe, it was a last-minute thing. Her dad called and asked if she could stay with me for the weekend since he wouldn't be in the country, Dave said.
So you are the only family she has? Are you trying out for the Best Cousin Award of the year? Because right now, you are a runner-up for the Worst Boyfriend of the Year, I hissed. I finished packing and Dave took the bags to the car. I sat in the front passenger seat, put my earphones on, and listened to music all the way to the lake. While in the cabin, Jade attempted to make small talk with me. I smiled and nodded and answered courteously, but all the while in my head, I had already ripped her head off and hung it on a spike. Hey, who's up for a swim? I said, clinging to Dave.
Sure, why not? The last one to the lake is a rotten egg, he said.
We all scrambled outside to the lake. Then Dave's phone rang.
Why don't you and Jade go ahead and I'll catch up, he said before answering the call.
Jade and I entered the water. It was cool and refreshing, definitely what my bones needed after sitting in a car for over an hour. Jade relaxed in the water next to me, telling me about the courses she was doing in college and how she couldn't wait to leave college so she could work at her father's firm. My attention wasn't on Jade, though. My focus was on Dave. He kept his eyes focused on the water as he chatted on the phone. I gave him a small wave and he smiled and waved back. A few minutes after Dave walked into the cabin, I noticed that Jade was no longer rambling in my ears. Jade? Jade! I searched for her head frantically above the water. Dave! Dave! I called from the water. Dave ran out of the cabin. I can't find Jade! I can't find Jade! I said hysterically. Dave immediately dove into the water to look for his cousin. I held my breath and felt helpless. Maybe if I was paying attention to her, this wouldn't have happened. After what seemed like an eternity, I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw Dave's head, then Jade's.
Call an ambulance,
Dave yelled at me. I came out of the lake quickly and ran inside to call the ambulance while Dave did CPR on Jade. After calling the ambulance, I stood by the door of the cabin. Please, Lord, let her be okay, I said, my eyes swelling with tears. Just then I heard Jade sputter, then cough. The ambulance came a few minutes later. Dave drove with the ambulance while I followed in the car. I arrived at the hospital and waited in the waiting area. After about 2 hours, I saw Dave and waved him over. How is she? Will she be okay? I asked, concerned.
The doctor said that she'll be okay, but they're keeping her overnight for observation,
Dave said as he hugged me. I'm so sorry about how I reacted earlier. I was just excited to spend the weekend with you, you know? I just wasn't expecting her to be there. Now look what happened, I said as I burst into tears.
It's okay, Kiara. Nobody could have predicted this. It wasn't your fault. Let's head home, okay?
Dave said as he steered me to the exit of the hospital. Dave called the next day.
I'm heading to the hospital to check Jade.
I'd like to visit her. Do you think she would want to see me? I could bring her some flowers. Do you think she likes flowers? I asked.
I'm sure she would be happy to see you, and she loves flowers. Her favorite are lilies. She's in room 307,
Dave said. We said goodbye and I purchased the flowers. The door to Jade's room was slightly ajar. I could hear Jade and Dave talking inside in low whispers. I'm telling you, Kiara had something to do with my accident. I was the junior swimmer championship winner 3 years in a row. There isn't any way I would just go under the water unless I was held, said Jade.
Stop being so paranoid, Jade.
Dave sounded unconcerned.
Kiara has been nothing but good to me. She isn't a killer. Yesterday was just a freak accident.
I waited a few seconds before knocking on the door. Can I come in? I said softly. Before Jade could answer, Dave said,
Hi, baby. Sure, come on in.
I walked into the room and handed the flowers to Jade and said, I'm so sorry about my attitude yesterday. I just wasn't expecting Dave to bring company on our first weekend together. Can you forgive me? Jade looked at me and said coldly, If anything happens to Dave, you will be the first person that I will be checking. My eyes widened. What are you talking about? Jade turned away from me and said nothing. I turned to Dave. What is she talking about? I asked, puzzled.
Nothing,
Dave said, scratching behind his head.
Look, Jade, I called Uncle Ralph and he'll be here shortly to take you home.
Dave kissed Jade on the cheek, took my hand, and walked out of the hospital. It was Valentine's Day, and Dave said that he had a grand surprise for me. However, there was a business function that he needed to attend first. I honestly didn't mind, since I also had a work function to attend. While sitting through one of the boring speeches, the waiters were serving drinks. The coworker next to me nudged my arm and pointed discreetly. Isn't that Dave? She asked. Where? I said, looking around the room. Over there by the door serving drinks, she said smugly. I reluctantly turned my head in the direction that my coworker pointed. There were hushed whispers at my table from my other coworkers. My eyes grew wide as there stood Dave in a black and white uniform with a serving tray in hand. I composed myself before I got up from the table and walked in the direction of where Dave stood. What the hell is going on? I hissed. Dave looked like a cat that caught the canary. You better say something before I change the entire atmosphere up in here, I snarled.
I'm not who you think I am,
Dave said as he tried to touch my arm, and I pulled away.
I'm not rich. I actually work for my uncle. He's this big executive and he's always away. He ensures that I have enough cash to entertain his clients in his absence. I actually still live at home with my parents and do odd jobs to make ends meet.
I took one of the drinks off the serving tray and threw it in his face. So you lied to me and made me look like a fool? Don't you dare come near me ever again. And don't bother calling, I said before turning and walking away. I woke up the next day to the sound of knocking on my door. Mrs. Joseph, it's the police, the voice said on the other side of the door. I walked to the door groggily and opened it. How can I help you? I asked. Mrs. Joseph, when was the last time you saw Mr. Dave Warren? Last time I saw him was last night when we broke up. What's this about? I asked. A feeling of dread came over me. I lifted my hand to remove a strand of hair from my eyes. I held my breath as one of the officers said, Mrs. Joseph, what's that on your hands, ma'am? I looked at my hands. A dry red substance was over both my hands. Mrs. Joseph, step out of the apartment with your hands up, one of the officers said. What's this about? I asked as I stepped out of the apartment. I was handcuffed and led to the police car by one of the officers. He said, Mr. Warren was brutally attacked last night. Standing in front of my house was Jade. She looked on but said nothing. I was placed in the police vehicle and I looked back and saw her get into a car. She drove past the police car and I noticed that there was a scratch on the side of the door. I screamed from the back of the vehicle, I'm innocent! I'm innocent! What do you guys think of my story? Do you think I'm innocent or guilty?
I hated going to school. My life was miserable. I couldn't help being a computer whiz kid, could I? I was a 14-year-old boy with 0 friends. All the boys in school thought I was a nerd and bullied me, so I decided I would take matters into my own hands. That's why I decided I would hack into the school's database and change my life. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Then maybe your life will change too. It was the last day of term, the end of the school year. Finally, I had something to look forward to, the school holidays. But first, I had to get through one more day at school. I picked up my school bag and set off. I walked to school alone, as I did every day. Nobody wanted to walk with the computer nerd. That's what they called me. As I walked through the school gates, I saw the school bully, Jason, standing in the doorway. I had no choice but to walk past him. As I got near, he spotted me. Well, look who it is, he laughed. Kevin the Geek. I ignored him and walked on. The quicker I got to the classroom, the quicker he would stop the name calling. He couldn't pick on me when the teacher was there. But when I walked into the classroom, the teacher was nowhere to be seen. Jason walked in after me. Oh no, poor geek, he said. Is your bodyguard not here? The other kids laughed. What are you gonna do during the holidays, geek? Asked Jason. Play your computer all day, I guess, because you've got no friends. Everyone burst out laughing again. I almost burst into tears, but thankfully Mrs. Thompson walked in and saved me. Come on now, class, take your seats and open your books at page 31, she said. Even though Jason and the other boys couldn't call me names now, it didn't stop them thinking of other ways to bully me. They rolled up pieces of paper and threw them at my head. When the bell rang, they stuck out their legs, so I tripped as I left the room. I was so happy when the final bell rang. I grabbed my bag and ran out of the school gates and straight home. Now I would be free for a whole month. No more bullying. The school holidays flew by. I spent my days at home studying and playing on my computer. It wasn't long before the final day of school holidays arrived. I was dreading going back to school. I sat in my room just wishing that I could stay there forever. Why oh why did I have to have boys in my class? The girls weren't mean to me. Well, actually they just ignored me, but that was fine. I wish I could be in a class full of girls. That's when the idea came into my head. What if I could hack into the school's database? I sat down at my computer and started tapping away, and it didn't take me long before I was into the school's computer system. A few minutes later, and I had rearranged all the classrooms. Now I was the only boy in my class. The first day of term was pretty much like any other school morning, except today I was excited to go to school. I couldn't wait to see if my plan had worked. I walked into my classroom and sure enough, there wasn't another boy to be seen. I sat down next to Julie and she smiled at me. "Looks like you're the only boy in our class this year," she said. "Don't you think that's weird?" "No," I replied. "I think it's perfect." She looked at me strangely after I answered her. I'd better be careful what I said in the future. I didn't want anyone to think I wanted to be in a class full of girls, or they might think I had something to do with it. The weeks went by and everything was fine. The girls started being quite friendly with me. They asked me to sit with them at lunchtime, which was really nice. I usually ate my lunch alone, trying to keep out of the way of Jason. Now I sat with the girls, laughing and giggling with them. Jason had pretty much forgotten about me now. I suppose it was a case of out of sight, out of mind. Or maybe he had found someone else to bully. "What are you doing on Saturday, Kevin?" asked Molly. Molly was the most popular girl in class. All the other girls wanted to be best friends with Molly. They hung on every word. They copied the clothes she wore and laughed at her jokes, even when they weren't funny. "Oh, nothing really," I replied. "I'll probably just play on my computer." "Why don't you come over to my house?" said Molly. "We are having a pool party." "Sure," I said. "Sounds like fun." I couldn't believe it. Not only had the bullying stopped at school, now I was actually being invited to a friend's house. I couldn't wait for Saturday to come around. I packed my swim stuff in a bag and shouted to Mom, "Bye, Mom, I'm going to Molly's house." "Bye, darling, have fun," said Mom. When I got to Molly's house, the other girls were already there. They were in the pool splashing around, so I changed quickly and joined them. I was really enjoying myself until one of the girls, Debbie, said to me, "Kevin, don't you think it's strange you're the only boy in our class? Have you any idea how that can be?" I looked at her. How should I handle this? "Yeah, it's a bit funny, but I'm cool with it," I replied. "Did you have anything to do with it?" she went on. Me? I stammered. Why would I have anything to do with it? But it was too late. My face was bright red and she knew I was guilty. "I knew it!" she screamed to the other girls. "It was Kevin all along." The other girls gathered around me, all asking questions at the same time. "How did you do it? Why did you do it? Why didn't you tell us?" Okay, I said. "Yes, it was me. I hacked into the school database and rearranged the classrooms. I was sick of being bullied by the boys in class." The girls were just about to start asking more questions when Molly's mom came out of the house. "Come on, everyone. You must be starving. Come into the house. There's pizza for you all," she said. We all went inside, changed, and grabbed some pizza on the way up to Molly's room. When I walked into Molly's room, the girls started asking questions again. "Can you hack into any computer?" asked Bree. "Yes, of course I can," I replied. "I'm a computer whiz." "Okay, prove it to us," she said. "Hack into the pizza restaurant's computer and order us another pizza." "That's easy," I said. It took me less than a minute to get into the system, and 20 minutes later, the pizza delivery guy was ringing the doorbell. From then on, it was non-stop. If it wasn't one girl asking me to get her a pair of shoes, then another one wanted a new dress. I spent all my free time ordering things for the girls. One weekend, they wanted to go to the movies. They told me to hack into the cinema computer and book tickets for us all. I didn't really want to carry on, but I knew that if I didn't do what the girls asked, then they would go to the principal and tell him I had changed the classrooms around. I couldn't risk being in class with Jason again, so I continued doing what the girls asked. It was nearly the end of the term and we had our final exams. I wasn't really nervous. I had been studying and revising a lot for the exams. The girls didn't seem quite as confident. In fact, some of them were really nervous. After the exams, we all met up to talk about how it went. "I've done so badly," said Molly. "Me too," said Bree. In fact, all the girls were saying the same thing. "What about you, Kevin?" asked Debbie. "How do you think you did?" "I think it went okay," I replied. "Kevin, you have to help us," said Molly. "You will have to hack into the school system again and change our grades." "I can't do that," I said. "I'll get caught." "If you don't, then we will tell the principal what you have done," said Molly nastily. "Okay then," I agreed reluctantly. "I'll do it." That night, I spent the evening giving all the girls better grades. I had to do it quickly because the school reports were being emailed to the parents the next morning. The next day at school, the girls were all happy with their grades, especially Molly. "You gave me an A," she said, smiling. "I usually get a D." We sat down in class and the lesson began. Halfway through the lesson, there was a knock at the door. In came the school secretary. "Mr. Dean, the school principal would like to see you, Molly," she said. Molly stood up and looked around nervously. She followed the secretary out of the classroom. I wonder what that's all about. I hope it's nothing serious, I thought to myself. Well, we soon found out. Molly's father had been so happy with Molly's report that he had gone personally to see Mr. Dean. He wanted to thank him for such an improvement in Molly's grades. But unfortunately, Mr. Dean didn't believe Molly had got the grade by herself. "He wants me to sit the exam again," cried Molly. "He wants to make sure I didn't cheat. You have to help me, Kevin." "Don't worry," I said. "I will help. You just need to wear some earphones and I will give you all the answers." So that's what I did. Molly retook the exam and got a grade A again. Mr. Dean seemed surprised, but he believed that Molly had done it all by herself. "That's it now, Molly," I said. "We're even. I'm not doing any more for you girls." But Molly had other ideas. "I need you to do one more thing for me," she said. "I want to get into Oxford University." "You're crazy," I replied. "The entrance exam for Oxford is really difficult." "Well, you'd better do a lot of studying then," said Molly. I sighed, but I knew what I had to do. I spent every spare minute I had studying and researching. Finally, the day came for the entrance exam. Molly had her earphones in and I gave her all the answers. When the university offers came in, Molly was shouting with glee. "I got into Oxford," she screamed, "with a full scholarship too." "Well done, Molly," I said sarcastically. "You still need to help me with my exams though," she whispered. So, of course, I carried on. Molly was top student in her class at Oxford. I was the one giving her all the answers and she got all the recognition. When was this ever going to end? One day I got a message from Molly. She wanted me to meet her for dinner. Finally, was this all going to be over? Was she going to say that she didn't need my help anymore? I met Molly at a nearby restaurant. As I walked in, she was already sitting at the table. She looked up and smiled. "Hi, Kevin," she said. "Hi, Molly," I replied. I sat down, but instead of Molly telling me it was all over, she began to explain what she needed from me now. She was going on a game show on TV, and the top prize was $1 million. She needed me to help her with all the answers. I was so angry, but I didn't want my secret to come out, so I agreed to help her. I spent the next few nights studying again. Finally, I was prepared. Friday night came around and Molly came on the TV. As the host asked Molly the questions, I gave her all the answers. "You really are a genius," said the host to Molly. "You must have studied really hard." "I did," said Molly, smiling. "I did it all by myself with no help from anyone." As I heard her words, my blood started to boil. How dare she say that? Then it came to the final question, the $1 million question. The host asked the question and I gave Molly the answer. "Wrong," said the host. Molly looked shocked. What she didn't realize was I had given her the wrong answer on purpose. About 30 minutes after the show had ended, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't have to ask who it was. I knew it would be Molly. I opened the door and saw Molly standing there. Her face was contorted in rage. "I'm going to tell everyone what you have done," she said. "You sabotaged me." But before she had a chance, I hacked into all her social media accounts and changed her password so she couldn't tell everyone. Then, the next thing I did was to hack into the game show's computer and put my name down for the show the following night. I'd been studying so hard, I knew I had a good chance of winning the money. The next night, I went on the show and I won $1 million. I was rich now, but I knew I couldn't stop Molly from telling everyone. Eventually, it would all come out. True to her word, she told everyone what I had done. At first, I was so ashamed, but then I got a phone call that made me feel a lot better. "Hello, is this Kevin?" said a man's voice. "Yes, I'm Kevin," I replied. "I am Mr. Martin from Oxford University," the man went on. "We understand that it was you that gave Molly all the answers to the entrance exam and all her other exams." "Yes," I admitted, "but I'm really sorry." "Well, I'm calling to offer you a place at Oxford University with a full scholarship," said Mr. Martin. "We have a vacancy now that Molly has been removed from the university due to cheating." I couldn't believe my ears. I suppose I had Molly to thank for all of this, really. If it wasn't for her forcing me to help her, I would never have studied so much. Now I was rich and had a place at one of the top universities in the world.